হ্যাঁ, ওই আপনি ইনভাইট গুলো দেখেছিলেন তো? মানে আমি দেখলাম ওই। ও তাহলে আমি তো তারপরেই পাঠিয়ে দিয়েছিলাম সকালেই আর কি। এটা কিভাবে তাহলে ওরা জানবে কিভাবে? হ্যাঁ, 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 বলো। হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে। হুম। হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে, আমি আমি চালু করে রেখেছি, ওয়েট করছি। হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে। হ্যাঁ। হ্যাঁ বলুন। আচ্ছা। হুম হুম। ওকে ওকে। ও আচ্ছা। হুম 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 হুম। আচ্ছা। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ। ঠিক আছে। ঠিক আছে। হ্যাঁ ঠিক আমি এইটার একটু ওয়েট করে যাচ্ছি। 10 মিনিট ওয়েট করে তারপরে ক্যান্সেল করবো। হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে। ওকে ওকে। হ্যাঁ। Okay. A very good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon, sir.
I know we've been a little delayed because of some communication gap. So quickly uh, let us quickly go through uh, some of the things which we have already done, and we will also be looking at one of the areas which we have sent you some material on during this lockdown. Okay, so let us take a look at the two broad classifications of communication, which all of you know, and that is internal and external communication, right? And you all know that internal communication is the communication that happens within the four walls of the organization amongst its employees, management, and then again we have external communication because business involves a lot of other stakeholders who are are located outside the organization. They are our suppliers, of course they are our customers, people who partnered with us, associates. So there are a whole lot of them, investors, of course, who invest in our company because they want to get some good return on their money. And of course, the general public also, the media, everybody is interested in the business, okay, because the information that is generated through uh, the business is used by the media. The government also is interested because it's a source of revenue for the government. Okay, so there are a whole lot of stakeholders who are interested in our business, right? So we see therefore that internal and external, um, you know, business communication can again be subcategorized. It can be subclassified. And the first classification is formal, the other is informal, which, as you can all understand, and you know, of course, and that is in the communication that happens in an organization, internally or externally, can be formal, it can be official, or it can also be informal, right? So within our colleagues, we speak formally as per the needs of the organization, and at the same time we also informally share a lot of things with our colleagues. The same thing we do with our customers. Official communication happens with customers, and again, informally a lot of things we share which are not official in nature, right? So now if you look at the further classifications of these, of course, informal communication, so to say, as far as external is concerned, there is no hierarchy, because in any kind of external communication there cannot be any hierarchy. You can't say that we are superior, customer is lesser than us, or customer is higher, we are junior. It's not like that. It doesn't happen that way. But internal communication has those hierarchies, right? So there is a manager who speaks or communicates with his junior. There is a general manager who will be communicating with his manager. So these kind of things happen. These kind of different types of communication happens, and therefore we find that communication happens downwards, like I mentioned the case of the manager, the subordinates, and at the same time we find that it also happens the other way. That is, we have the subordinates who also coordinate or communicate with their seniors. Okay, so it happens upward and downwards. So vertical communication happens upward and downwards. Similarly, we also have communication which happens amongst peer groups, okay, people who are at the same level, colleagues, right? So we may have people from the same department communicating with each other, right? Or even it could be that people from two different departments who are at the same level they can also be communicating with each other. So we can have a manager in an HR department having a chat or having a communication with someone in production department, right? So they are managers. They're both managers at the same level. So that is also horizontal communication. Likewise, as I said, that within a department, a manager in sales department is having something, some information being shared with a manager in the same department, right? So that can happen. So we have, therefore, horizontal communication, which happens at the same level. At the same time, we must also appreciate another kind of communication, which is diagonal in nature. And that means that there's a hierarchy, right? So there's communication happening between two levels, but the concept of it being diagonal is that it happens across two different departments, or else it would have been just vertical, right? So we may have an HR manager communicating with, let's say, a senior manager in marketing, or an HR manager communicating with maybe a junior officer in marketing. So these are examples of diagonal communication. And again, whether it's happening upwards or downwards will depend on who communicates with whom. Is it the higher level personnel communicating with the junior level, or is it the other way around? Right? So in this way, therefore, we must appreciate these three important formal communication channels, namely vertical, namely the other one which we mentioned, horizontal, and of course, we must also appreciate diagonal communication. Now, informal communication, as I just told you a while ago, is something which is again very important. And in fact, most of the time in an organization, you will find informal communication happening. It's not that most of the times we are getting formal communication. So there is informal communication happening all the time. And we as management needs to keep a tab on such communication, because such communication helps us to, kind of have a pulse, okay, have some indication as to what the mood of the organization is like. It helps us, as they say, to feel the pulse of the organization, the employees of the organization. Are they unhappy? Are they depressed? Okay, or are they euphoric, and are they enjoying their work at the organization? Are they very satisfied with the organization? So if we want to get some insight into their mind, then it's important that we keep some tabs on informal communication. Again, it's a policy matter, or it's a matter of strategy as to whether you will allow such communication to happen freely, or whether you would put checks and balances, or maybe like the Chinese government, you don't allow it at all, right? So I think it all depends upon the organization. So it's not like, it's your choice. It is a decision which the management has to take on the basis of its needs. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So if the need of the organization is that you need to put a lot of checks and balances, because maybe things are already going haywire, maybe the company is highly indisciplined, right? Everybody goes in his own way. Nobody listens to nobody, is like that. Okay, so in such a situation, you obviously need to control the organization, control its communication, and make sure that the organization comes back to track. Because if they don't manage to come back to track and let the functions be executed seamlessly, then what is going to happen is we will see a lot of further turmoil, right? So it's the organization, the way it's moving forward, okay, that actually will determine, as to what kind of position we should take. Okay, if the organization is going just fine, everyone is empowered, okay, employees are happy, then it shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we can allow such communication to happen, because this kind of communication is also kind of it works like a ventilator. It allows the employees to ventilate, okay, some frustration that he may be having, something he wanted to share which he was not able to, okay, something which is very organization relevant. So it doesn't make sense to share this with someone in his family, because they won't appreciate it, okay, or with a friend, he or she will not appreciate it either. So it needed to be shared with somebody in the organization who understands that dynamic. And the only way you could do this is, share this with someone in the organization in an informal setting. Okay. So this informal communication is called Grapevine. As you all know, we have studied this in class. And not just that, we have also studied its various forms. So this is a review of all that. So you have a single strand chain like this, where communication just flows in a linear form, okay, A to B, B to C, like that. So this is how, sometimes gossip moves on. Similarly, you have what we call the gossip chain, where one person sits at the center, okay, like a center of a wheel, and the others are as if sitting on the rim of the wheel. And it's the gentleman or lady who sits at the center, shares information with the others. So that's what we call a gossip chain, something again which we see everywhere, at homes, in communities, okay. And then again, we have the probability chain, where, as the name suggests, that someone transmits the information as per the laws of probability, which means in a random fashion. So he doesn't look at who the person is, he just transmits the information, okay, randomly. And obviously the objective here is to share the information with as much or as many as people possible. Perhaps with whom it is to be shared is not much consequential, okay, but it's the quantity that matters in this case. So that could be the reason why we go random, right? However, if the target is important, in that case, we may go for something called a cluster chain, where we actually, identify people with whom to share. Okay, so like a convenience sample, as you know. So we decide as to whom to share and whom not to share. So in that case, of course, the information that is shared matters with the target. There's a relationship with the target. So it could be that as for someone, it doesn't matter. And for someone else, it would matter. Okay, now though we got delayed information, we have allowed everybody in till now. So we'll stop it at the moment as far as allowing more people in, because we are already, through almost. It's 1:26. So I think we just got about 10-15 minutes left. Okay, so this is one thing which I wanted to review. The other area which I wanted to review is the enemies of communication, or the barriers of communication. Okay, now as I shared with the other classes also, and the same thing I would like to share with you, and that is, it is a fact that communication has so many different enemies. In fact, the number of enemies of communication is just huge. And that is exactly the reason why we have so much of conflict and so much of strife in the world. because there are so many hindrances to communication. And what we have done is we have categorized these enemies, these barriers, into different sections. Okay, we have physical barriers like the physical, noise. The other name for barriers is noise. So if you're using equipment, for example, for communication, if that equipment is poor, communication cannot happen. If the infrastructure within which you are communicating, if there's some problems with those, communication will be affected. Okay, if there's a lot of background noise going on, people are shouting or construction work is going on, then again, there will be problems. There can be lighting related issues where you can't see the person who is trying to converse with you, right? Sometimes adverse weather conditions can impact technology through which communication is taking place. So that also is important for us to note. Now, apart from these physical barriers, there are also psychological barriers or attitudinal barriers, also referred as emotional barriers. So any kind of adverse emotion, if we are angry, if we are sad, such states of mind do not help communication to happen effectively. Okay, so if we are angry, for example, then there's no way in which effective communication can take place. If we are sad also, we can't have effective communication happening. Okay, so these are the kind of state of minds which we have to avoid, okay, particularly when we are in business communication. And if we are, for example, angered over something, then it would be prudent advice to that person not to communicate for a while. Okay, and he or she can only do the needful after he gets back his normal emotions. And then, of course, you have nervousness, which is again a very important attitude or emotional noise which causes problems, right? So if you're nervous, in your exams you can't fare well. If you're nervous, you can't fare well in an interview. So these are all interviews and exams. These are what? These are nothing but different formats of communication, specialized form of communication, right? So if you are nervous, you can't fare well in these formats of communication and in any other format of communication. The same thing if you don't trust the other person. Okay, like if you're writing an exam and if you feel that the examiner who has formulated these questions doesn't know anything, okay, and naturally your communication will not be effective. So distrust is a big factor. Okay, personal agenda again could be a very important factor. If you have a personal agenda, then the sense of communication dilutes, because you will always be pursuing that personal agenda in everything, each and everything. So that is something which is an important barrier. Apart from this, we have language barriers based on differences of language, as well as the accents and colloquialisms which we use. Physiological issues are there, health related issues, physical health related issues. Sometimes we can have a vision challenge that can affect communication. Sometimes we may be having a pain in some part of our body, and that will not put us in the right frame of mind, and hence communication will get affected. So there are a whole lot of these barriers, structure design in organizations. Sometimes there are gaps, between the supervisor and subordinates. There could be issues in the organizational structure where it is not properly designed, and hence the communication doesn't flow seamlessly. Okay, and we can also have other kinds of noise. We can have cultural noise. This is about preconceived notions about other cultures, very prevalent. You look at what's happening in America today. So these issues related to race, community, etc. So stereotypical assumptions about others. Okay, and of course we can also have semantics, a very, very important cause of barrier. I mean, very important cause of hindrances in communication, because semantics is about attaching different meanings to to the same words, to the same signs. Okay, so it's very important, therefore, that we use simple words which may not be interpreted in too many different ways. And we may use, pictures, because when we look at pictures, when we look at photographs, we look at it in more or less a single way. Like if we look at a picture of a cat, you see it as a cat and I see it as a cat. It's not like someone sees the cat as a dog. Okay. So therefore, if you use a lot of pictures, then you can reduce semantics. So in case you feel that the word that I'm going to use might go above the head of someone, or he may interpret it in a different way. We may reduce the use of jargons, for example. That's another very important way in which we can reduce the impact of semantics. Right, so these are different barriers which hinder the process of communication, which we have talked about in our sessions. And the idea of appreciating these barriers is, at the end of the day, to ensure that we do enough to reduce those barriers when we are communicating. Because as businessmen, as business professionals, we must be effective communicators. And in order to ensure that we are effective, we must see to that there is minimum barriers coming into the picture, and we must reduce the impact of those barriers. Okay, so in the remaining few minutes, what we will do is look at memos, which I think you have received some material which was sent later. So there are different kinds of memos. It's an internal communication document. And the first kind of memo that you can see is the request memo. Okay, and then you have the here you go, the request memo you can see on your screen. The objective of the request memo is to gain a favorable response to a request. The memo must be written in a convincing way. And here is an example now, which I would like to show you right on the screen, of a very badly written request memo. And what you see here is it says that, may I attend the time management seminar that is being offered by the Chamber of Commerce next Thursday. Now, obviously, this is a very poorly written memo, and we can appreciate and we can understand why it would easily get rejected, because there is no convincing tone in that memo. There is no reason given as to why the person in question should at all attend this seminar, what benefit it would have for the organization and for himself. Okay. However, if you check out this one, okay, you will see how this is a much better memo. Okay, so if you look here, then you can see that the commercial aspect has been mentioned as to how much money is involved in attending the seminar. Very important in business that any commercial implications must be clearly stated. And you must justify the expense also. And this author of this particular memo has done that clearly. He has compared this to events or seminars which would cost 4 or 5 times more, and it would involve some stay in some other location and involving additional costs. Okay, so he has very appropriately justified as to why this proposition of a 500 rupees seminar for the entire day is a much better proposition. And he also justifies why he needs it, why the organization needs it, because he very clearly states that he has been working without an assistant for 6 months. And instead of demanding for some assistance by appointment of another employee, what he has actually tried to convince the management is to invest on him a little bit more through this training program, by means of which his productivity could improve. Okay, so this also shows a very ethical bend of mind of the person. Okay, any other employee would, be very frustrated, and he would start demanding that immediately somebody is appointed, or else he would leave or something like that, but he has not done that. Now, the other good thing about this memo, if you look at the last paragraph or the last section, you will see that the dates have been clearly mentioned. So the decision maker is aware as to by when decision needs to be taken regarding giving him approval. Right. So the qualities of a good request memo, therefore, should be that the request must be clearly stated. The reasons for the request must, of course, be presented well. If there are financial costs involved, they should be explained well, and all the expenses must be well justified. Recommendations for the action must be presented. And of course, since you're making a request, and you all know the art of making a request, whether to your father or to your boss, there has to be a lot of tact and a lot of diplomacy. Timing also has to be very, very perfect. Okay, then you have a confirmation memo. Sometimes we discuss a lot of things in the organization, but then we need to put them in paper, right? And this is an example of such a memo where we find that the gentlemen have discussed a few things and they have put those in writing, right? So here it talks about appointment of salespeople and what their salaries would be like, right? And what would be their, areas that they would be covering. Okay, so all of that has been identified. Okay, and not just that, very well presented. So each section mentions a different aspect of the discussion that took place. And if you look again in the last section, very clearly ask for feedback in case certain things need to be changed. Maybe someone doesn't agree that this was discussed, or maybe something else needs to be put in. That can also be done. Okay, so we don't have much time left, so I'll quickly go through the periodic report memo. So here what happens is we, give information with regards to things that have been achieved. Maybe it's about monthly sales or quarterly sales. Memo should be designed as a fill-in form and things like that. Okay, just a second. Class is on. Class is on. Okay. Okay. So the form should be designed so that it can be duplicated and reused. If narrative or descriptive commentary is necessary, a place should be provided in the form. Now, here is an example of a very poorly written sales report. You can see a lot of data, but all of them has just been, jumbled up together. And the very first instance, when you look at this, it's like a turn off. You don't want to read it because when you're looking at figures, you want some comparison, you want some tables, but you don't want to read data like this, right? So here is a better way of presenting it, and here is that better presented, report memo. So we have the names of the salespeople, what they have achieved this year, what they did last year, and it's all done on the basis of the areas given to them. So this is Kerala and Karnataka. Then you have Tamil Nadu, okay. Then you have Maharashtra, AP, and Orissa, right? So their sales figures have been put forward. What they did in the last year, that has also been presented. So you know exactly which are the ones who are performing and which are the ones who are not, etc. So you get a clear idea. You also get an idea on the basis of areas, right? So well presented report. And finally, you have another kind of memo, which is called the ideas and suggestions memo. Sometimes you may be asked to write such a memo, and sometimes, of course, you may just give it on your own. But whatever you do, you must begin with positive comments. You must group your ideas, must be specific. The ideas must be specific. You shouldn't, stray at any point. Okay. So, and if you look at an example here, this is not a very good memo. And we will see again why this is not a good memo. Because again, it clubs everything together, okay? Goes straight away saying, thank you for asking me for suggestions regarding how we can reduce absenteeism and turnover. I think some of the areas we should examine include competitive salaries, benefit package, job design. I'm sure there are many other areas that warrant attention. So this again is like a hodgepodge, and most importantly, there isn't much in it, to be very honest. No specific ideas as such. However, we find a better output in this example, where we find that the lady in question, Seema Paul, she has made separate heads, competitive salaries, and then she speaks about benefit package, then she speaks about job redesign. And what's interesting is she makes a very balanced approach to this. She speaks about the good things currently, because you don't want to write only poor things about your company and give ideas. You must balance out things, and that is exactly what has been done. Right, so we will stop it here today. I hope you have all been benefited through this through these review sessions. Okay, thank you very much.